Good evening. I'm your host, Rob. Thank you for listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I've got with me RDV, and of course, RDV, we're broadcasting from the Xtreme Studios in the Xtreme Palace just west of Orlando, Florida. And we have a special treat tonight. We are in what some people would like to refer to as the Dome of Thunder, where two movies enter, one movie remains. And of course, we're going back to 1981 as we continue our best of as we go through the 80s decade. And we're going to have Indiana Jones and Raiders go up against Evil Dead. And I got to be completely honest with you. This was such a struggle because, Raiders is like the gold standard. And so Evil Dead, you're probably going to get served up a heaping, helping pile of whoop ass. But I'm going to try to defend you here a little bit, even though I still love them both. What's your initial take on both these films? I know you like them, but I love them too.
I actually love both of them. I love Evil Dead, and I love Raiders as well. Raiders, I'll admit, is kind of the better movie, or at least more recognized, popular, because it's Indiana Jones, it's Harrison Ford, it was Disney, Steven Spielberg, Universal. But Evil Dead has its own cult following, even being the lower budget one here.
Yep.
And Bruce Campbell is loved by millions. And just even though the first one was, some argue say it was more serious, it wasn't as goofy, slappy as the second one and the third one were. People still love it. I thought, wow, because I watched the first one. I was having seen Army of Darkness first. It only came out in the 90s, which was the third one,
right? And
then I was like, what is this? Evil Dead, the first one. I'll go watch this. Like, this is so like serious. This isn't the Bruce Campbell that I know. Especially after seeing him in like shows like Jack of All Trades, Cleopatra 2525, and just other stuff like that. Hercules, is on there,
right.
And see him in such a serious role like this, and like it was really cool. So honestly, I love them both. I mean, it's for me, obviously, the more like I guess you'd say like the general population or the cliche thing would be like, well, Raiders is awesome, Indiana Jones stuff, and honestly, I kind of lean more toward Evil Dead for me personally. It's so out there, it's so unique for being a horror movie. It's not your typical slasher movie. I was reading about it, and like I forgot who it was, but someone like the LA Times had said, that's how you took. I think you said you took 3 different movies. You took you took the Three Stooges, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then Night of the Living Dead, and put them in a blender, and that's Evil Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's great. Indiana Jones
has what? No, stop it.
No, Indiana Jones has more than laughs though, because you're going from a movie about laughter and adventure to a serious movie over here. Now, if we did Evil Dead 2, I think they'd be more evenly matched, because Evil Dead 2 is more of the slapstick comedy stuff.
I to be honest with you, I think if you're going to put one Evil Dead movie out of all of them up against Indiana Jones, it should be this one, because I think I know everybody thinks of Evil Dead, and really it's the second and third films and the TV show that kind of was what people think of, and it's fun and it's cool and it's neat, and we like them. But to me, the first film is head and shoulders above all the rest. I like the serious tone with it. I agree with you that even if it's a distillate of 3 different films or whatever, I don't really care. I like the fact that when you know the story of Bruce Campbell himself and Sam Raimi, how they like knew each other in school and all that stuff, and they would make stuff on their own.
Yes.
It's one of those things. I'm not arguing talent or luck or whatever, because a lot of things, honestly, is right place, right time. That's called luck, and you only get lucky by working really hard to have the opportunity to maybe, hey, I'm working on this, but you end up being really good, and we end up working together later. So those are the things that happen. It definitely is a family affair here with them, and I like that, and I appreciate it. And so for the Evil Dead, I think that I mentioned to you how, like with Halloween, I think it's one of the best slasher films of all time. It's not really a slasher in a sense, but all the distillate stuff after that, Friday the 13th, we talked about, everything is just, they're watchable, but they're just second, third tier. And to me, this Evil Dead's got a bit more of a serious, dark tone to it, and it's got some goofiness too that reminds you of the old stuff. Whether, well, a year from the movie opening would be Clash of the Titans, but other stop action type things that were kind of cool in a way that when you're a kid watching it, if you watched like Sinbad, Ancient Voyage, and all those things too, all the Ray Harryhausen things, you're like, this is kind of cool. It's not necessarily scary, but it looks good, and it doesn't look too gimmicky. It's just different.
And I love that whole plot. It's 5 friends, going to a cabin in the middle of the woods. Come across these old tapes, and like they push play, and this allows these this Chimerian like demons to come into under our plane and start possessing it. First, his sister Cheryl gets possessed, and then and then you see like first you see her, she's not possessed, but it's basically like saying like join us. She hears voice. She goes outside. She has that really harsh scene with the demonic trees raping her.
Yep.
That was just disturbing on so many levels. I've never seen that before. Yeah, definitely.
Mother Nature will rape you. Mother Nature always wins.
Yes. And so after that, she comes back in. You see like the whole thing with her just being like distraught with this. But then the other two girls are basically Linda, what's his name's girlfriend, and then I forgot who the other girl's name was. But anyway, they're playing cards here, and then Cheryl's over there kind of just like calling off what the cards are. Mm-hmm. Before they're getting freaked out by that, and then all of a sudden she rises up. That's kind of
cool, though, right? That's a cool scene, right?
You like how she rises up, and then she's like, "Oh," in the deep voice, "You've woken us." It's like, I'm like, what the heck? The makeup and everything, and then she stabs Linda with a pencil into Linda's ankle, so then that gets affected, and as you said, like it just one by one, and like as Ash is listening to the tape downstairs, he's like, the only way to destroy the demons is to dismember them. He's like, dismember them? Like, I can't do that. So when everyone starts being attacked, his friend Scott, who's there with his girlfriend too, like Scott's girlfriend gets possessed, and she's taken, and just like it's everything. It's just basically down to basically bros versus the possessed girls, and then Scott leaves, but eventually Scott comes back wounded by trees, saying like, we can't leave at all. The trees won't let us, bro. Because even Ash tries to leave with Cheryl at first, and they couldn't. The bridge was destroyed. And I said, it's such a low budget thing. Filmed in Tennessee. It is towards the end of the year, around December and January. It was so cold and stuff. And I love Sam Raimi, man. Sam Raimi's like, if you're not suffering, it's not looking real on film. so he's like, if we're gonna do like a slasher thing, or like there's gonna be lots of blood, you're gonna look uncomfortable. And some of the cast didn't like that, but some other ones like Bruce Campbell was just for it because he figured he saw the vision.
We've got nothing to lose. Everything in the game.
Yeah, and it turned out to be one of the best films. Even Fangoria, which normally doesn't feature a lot of movies in there, they said like they recommended this film. Is like, dude, you have to see this film. It's 1981. This is like, we've seen other horror films like you've never seen anything like this. So we got a lot of attention. Stephen King praised it, saying it was his top 5 of the genre.
Well, I think that too. One of the things about Bruce Campbell I think of is when you see him in here, he's not the Bruce Campbell we know. We see seeds of it and everything too, but you see the beginning of a young man that's getting involved in something. And I don't know what would have happened to him if he ended up not staying with it, but obviously he's gone and have a very successful career working actor. I think that when you watch this film, the 70s had this big occult thing going on, and we talked about how modern horror in the late 60s, early 70s was kind of like a reinventioning of what to do. And then also you could do a lot more that you couldn't do in the 50s and 60s, right? So you could have more graphics, sex and violence and everything too. And especially in the 70s where people got a little artistic and experimental with it. So you had your Italian styles and European styles. And I think Sam Raimi's over-the-top gonzo style is kind of, we know it's there. It's kind of fun, but we know to expect it. But when you watch this early on and you don't know, it's a little different. And you and I have commented so many times about natural effects. And here, the people that turn into zombies, and you saw this on Drag Me to Hell and everything else that he's done there. He keeps a lot of that same stuff in it. It's effective. It looks good, even though it's cheaply done. That's all that matters is how good does it look, not how much money you spend on it.
We talk about Wes Craven, but Sam Raimi, I think he is great at what he does. You saw what he did recently with Doctor Strange 2. He directed that, and he had the same elements. He put it in his movies, and I love it. It just get that dark feeling, kind of scary feeling. And Sam Raimi said, I don't know how much younger he is than Steven Spielberg, but I don't really hear about Steven Spielberg anymore. Really, I think he's kind of dropped out of the limelight. Yes. Where Sam Raimi is just hunger more. But imagine how many people were inspired by this Evil Dead to M. Night Shyamalan. They start doing movies like this. And like I said, Evil Dead is a low budget movie that shouldn't have basically got to where it is and it is. And not to say it's a bad movie. It's just one of those movies. It's a fluke, and at least it was back then. And then all of a sudden it just blew up, and then the cult grew, and then I think they lost the film rights or distributing rights to the first movie or something. Or something like that. There's a rumor, but when they did Evil Dead 2, he went full into those Three Stooges. And I love, like, I was reading up about this, because I love reading about Sam Raimi stuff. Sam Raimi said he loves doing fake shemp thing. So basically, when they need an actor or behind the scenes, but the actor's busy or somewhere else, they get a stand-in to look, so you don't see his face, but it's somebody else posing as an actor. So if you see the back of Bruce Campbell's head, it's not always Bruce Campbell. Yeah. I love that. So adding in the slapstick, because this movie obviously was serious. I think Evil Dead 2 capitalized on this by bringing in the humor.
Yes.
Not to say that this is a bad movie. It's just that
it's a different film.
He realized that, man, if I lean more into the slapstick stuff, people like that more, and it's true.
And serious horror, has its place, and go back to the early 70s when you talk about, like, late 60s with like Rosemary's Baby, and then you had, I always talk about how the Catholic Church or just Christians have that stranglehold on exorcism kind of stuff. The first Exorcism movie is still fantastic, and the latest one kind of sucks, but you're still compelled to watch it because of the history of all these things. And when I look at like the Evil Dead, I don't know if they were targeting specific films to take things out of, but you can create an air of a serious tone. You don't have to know why the evil or the bad stuff is what it is. You don't. You just have to, exactly. And simple can be super effective. And I like how in here, again, if you know Bruce and you go to watch this, you're like, yeah, all these guys are chumps. Nobody's going to make it out. But again, early on, you kind of knew he was one of the main characters, but he doesn't jump off the screen at you like he's Tom Cruise and you got a bunch of goofballs or whatever like that, right? I mean, he's just a guy, a dude with his bro and some chicks and all that. So it's very believable. And the whole low budget thing to it is, like I've said this before, you give an artist what they need to do their job. And I mentioned this before about John Carpenter. I mentioned about James Wan. I'm not a big comics book guy, but I know he does some bigger stuff. I think he did Aquaman or whatever, Leslie Wannell, but they work together a lot. So they always work together and do good stuff. Part of me goes, man, if those guys would do these films, Sam Raimi with the Spider-Man films, right? I'm like, when I see it, I see a Sam Raimi film. I don't see the MCU like you would see with all this other crap. And it's just a feel for it. And I appreciate it when they have the ability to have their vision implemented, no matter what the story is going to be or the setting. And if he chooses to go a little slapstick, he did it in the second one, improved on it in the third. And we saw that obviously with the TV show that was on Starz some years ago. I think we even covered the first season here on Xtreme TV because it's so damn good. That first episode with the soundtrack and everything, it's just, that's how you do it.
Yeah. And speaking of comic books, both Indiana Jones and Evil Dead did spawn comic books. Marvel took over the Indiana Jones stuff, but then eventually it went over to Dark Horse. And then it kind of fizzled out. There hasn't really been any in probably 20, 30 years now. Or Evil Dead has a book called Army of Darkness. It's been going on through Dynamite since the early 2000s, and it's just still ongoing. There's one right now. It's called Ash Forever or Evil Dead Forever, kind of like, and it basically focuses on the first plots of the third movie, where instead of the alternate ending, because there's two endings for that, where basically Ash oversleeps. He sleeps too long. He wakes up in the future, the far future. So like playing on that, Tony Fleece, the guy writer of Stray Dogs, is tackling that. But let's talk about Indiana Jones. We've been talking about Evil Dead for a little bit here. Indiana Jones does have its merits. It is, and I apologize. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. I understand they wanted to change it because they wanted to adapt it to all the other movies. George Lucas wanted to do that and see where. But honestly, it's Raiders. That's what we call it. We call it Raiders.
Everybody's yeah.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark also has its scary moments, including cool stuff. Ark of the Covenant. And like I said, Raiders will always be the best Indiana Jones films. Period. I love Crusade, but I just love Raiders. The whole Ark of the Covenant, John Rhys Davies, first meeting him, the Nazi gun, the gun, the sword, he shoots the guy. It's just everything. Trying to find the the Ark of the Covenant, and it just going through underneath the library, going through the maze, and like with the girl, and just like it was just perfect. The damsel in distress, but also she's also hold her own. Karen Allen is a perfect companion to Harrison Ford's character. So I mean, I loved all this, and the fact that he's just like a regular professor in the I believe in the late 30s, and early 40s before World War II, and the girls are just fawning over him because they played on this because Harrison Ford is a good looking dude. He was good looking back then, and they played to that to his character. And, like he's a good, and that's a common thing back in the day. Schoolgirls had crushes on their teachers, and
they still do.
Yeah, and Alfred Molina is best known for being run over by a ball here.
That's true.
Top guy gets taken off by a giant boulder after betraying Indiana Jones. He's like, haha, and like, no. So yeah, and it's just a sense of adventure. I love this time period. I love the late 30s, early 40s, just the culture, everything. The limitations on transportation. You take a train or you take a plane. And cars, if you can afford them, these certain cars, but a lot, like I said, there was no internet, there was no cameras, none of this smart stuff, like you get see in Mission Impossible and stuff, where they're racing stuff. This was just, you hid back from the Nazis back then, you pulled your collar up on your shirt, and you took your head down.
Yeah.
And that's, or he even dresses up as one in here too. And of course, I'm surprised this has never been canceled because all the people are triggered by, oh, you can't have Nazis in it. You can't talk about Nazis. This shows what Nazis are, evil people. And the snakes, dear God, the snakes. All of us have had a phobia of snakes because of this movie. Yeah, like I said, I love Harrison Ford. I think he's a great actor. Also has a strong chin. I understand that we're talking about who has the best chin.
Well, I mean, you got to bring that up every now and then, right? I think Harrison Ford, I mean, he's had such a long run with a lot of good things, and I think he's, we talked about how wimpy in Star Wars Luke is, and we don't give a shit about him, so we're obviously drawn to the guy that's a seasoned vet, basically, and it's kind of the same thing in here. He's the anchor of it. You get to see him kind of almost in a comic book sort of fashion, like in a hero, in the sense he has his boring day job as a teacher, which is not a very sexy job. I mean, it can be cool. I'm not saying it's not, but it's just one of those things. But his real passion is what he does on the side time, and that's goes after find artifacts. And so I think everybody too, especially when this came out, you have the Cold War ending, you had Reaganism starting to come on. Yet a lot of people still had this thing for America, and I think the stuff in the 30s and 40s when you start having monster movies and war movies, is people start realizing, America's the best. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. If you're around the globe in the country so much as I'm sitting there and saying there was a sense of history. If you knew it was 30s and 40s, okay, you knew it was the Great Depression, you knew World War II was going to start there in the late 30s, early 40s. The rise of the Third Reich. You just, their things are segmented, and a generation or two you kind of still felt connected to. Whereas somebody saw Raiders now for the first time, I wonder how they would feel, because it wouldn't have that same emotional appeal of seeing all these things. And item that you mentioned earlier, I thought was interesting, was the fact that even though transoceanic flights and travel was improving, it still was very difficult. And like I say, to this day, I don't know why. I don't know if it's the first time I ever saw it. Maybe not. I love seeing the stupid line on the map as he's flying from one place as a transition. And I get off on that so much. I don't know why. It's just so damn cool.
I'm pretty sure that probably was used before Indiana Jones, but Indiana Jones becoming at that period of time, they went with that. They brought it back. And it just works, man. It's like when you watch those old 1950s, like, do's or don'ts, or how an engine works and stuff, those, document. And you get that same nostalgia feel, like, oh, these are kind of cool. I know they're really outdated, but it's like, it's cool. And they actually show you how things work and stuff. You see that on TV. You watch stuff like Chevys or Fords. This is how we went from these engines to this engines. And Indiana Jones is just in that kind of time period. It's like you get to see, like I said, the line where the plane goes. And you're like, oh, it's so cheesy, but it works. It just, like I said, this is a guy who goes around. He has a gun, a pistol, and he has a whip, a bullwhip. And throughout the movie, he's arguing with a girl he basically slept with and left. and now she's part of the Avenger because, well, he had returned because that's where he returned to, and it's awkward for him. And I love the fact that they bicker back and forth to this. But not only that, you get the really disgusting German, evil Nazis, and it's like Mr. and like there's like Jones, it's like we meet again, and he's always getting. So just when he's like basically getting to like he's got the wind stuff, something happens, and he hears a gun click behind his head, and he's like, oh, you know. But I like the fact that he's Indy, even though Indy is kind of outgunned, he's still smart, and he's still able to outsmart his enemies.
Yeah.
Like I said, so he's got that situation of humor, which really helps us drive this movie. But it also, he also has the fact it's a 1940s movie, 1930s, late 30s. So you're getting not only that kind of cool stuff. Like we watch Captain America: First Avenger. I love the fact that it's set back in World War II. I love that era. I love watching movies like The Maltese Falcon, or anything with Cary Grant back in the 40s. Watching that stuff, it is just fun, and just seeing the outfits they wear. You're not seeing anybody with like with iPods, in ears or printed T-shirts. Everybody was dressed in a nice formal attire. It was
now
fun.
For the fashionista segment of the show, I will want to expound on that too, because you bring up an interesting point. We've talked about this with cars and lots and everything too, filming on location. If you think about it too, a lot of people were living on farms in the 1800s, and there was obviously a few big cities in the United States and capitals and whatnot too, but the majority of the population at the time was basically farm-based or rural, right? So, when you had manufacturing picking up in the 1800s and a big wealth boom going on, and you had this great migration into cities, people still, for the most part, had to make their own clothes. It wasn't really until about the turn of the century things started getting mass-produced clothes-wise, but still, that's why if you ever watch an old film and it goes down and down, and yes, it's a film, so they're putting something on that looks good, but generally, even if you catch like the people on the outside of the film in the background or whatever, whether they're paid extras or just back screen footage, they just dress better. Even if you were a bum and you were in a soup line in the late 20s, you still basically had a hat, and you had a jacket or something like that too. Now you may not have a whole bunch of them or whatever, it may not fit, you may be scrawny, but you were dressed up. You're a player.
You had your nice shirt,
player, but you're a player nonetheless.
You had your nice shirt, if you're well off, you had the 3-piece outfit going on there. You had the vest, the shirt, and then you had the coat over it, and then you actually had the actual raincoat they put over. I always laugh at the 2 trench coats we talk about. Bogart would wear. We say we're going Dark Passage. I love that, and I was wondering why are they wearing it? It made sense because they didn't have rain jackets available for everybody. Right. Cops had their own rain jackets, but I don't think there was. People had umbrellas, but everybody had the huge coat because you remember you would wear the dress suit, the dress pants. That was your outfit.
And if you're in the military, you had an overcoat, basically, especially in the Navy with the pea coat.
So that's why you were wearing the trench coat, because it covered your pants and everything. It kept your whole looking nice underneath. I like that. So we always talk about Dick Tracy and on the coats they wear, and those are cool. The attire, but like I said, both even Evil Dead had nice attire too. Given the 70s, like you said, it wasn't. I said, it was still getting kind of the rebellious kind, but it was still kind of formal. Not like Indiana Jones, but what is he wearing? He's wearing a nice button down, a blue shirt, dress shirt or long sleeve dress shirt. And he's got the khaki pants on, the belt and everything, and the shoes.
Yeah, a lot more pure cotton there, not a lot of synthetics too. And if you're really rich, you had say linen, pressed linen suit. Now that was super expensive, but extremely comfortable and breathable, especially in tropical climates like here in Central Florida. I think one of the reasons why Indiana Jones obviously kicks the shit out of Evil Dead here, and I think it's no secret there really is no contest, is that when you watch this film, I remember watching as a young kid with my father and my brother, and it's just a lot of fun. I know there's an intense scene or two, especially if you're younger, at least by those standards, a generation or two ago. But the family can watch it. You get who the good guys and bad guys are. There's not necessarily a lot of bad violence or language. It's done effective, so you can watch it when you're young, old. It can be a family affair. I'm not going to speak to the historical nature of things that are going on for people really want to get into it. It's fun. He's a hero basically, and that's one of the things that we always talk about, the hero's journey and the average person becoming heroic by doing what needs to be done and the right thing if they can. I think he's got a little bit of that in him, because in his heart of hearts, he wants things to be in the right place, not necessarily make a fast buck, which you could easily do. And it's just a spectacle when you watch it, right? It feels like it's a big film. It feels like,
Yeah,
you've seen summer films up to this point, you've seen
it's an
stuff,
adventure.
but then when you see this, you're like, this is what the type of movie you're supposed to see when you go to the film, when you go to the theaters in the summer, no matter what your age is. You just say, man, I want something big. I want something like it. And the only thing that comes close to me in terms of a spectacle film is not the CGI crap fest like the Lord of the Rings that you like to bash on a little bit, or me, a lot of the
Mhm.
comic book movies. I'd say the Mission Impossibles have done a decent job of that. And there's great
Yeah,
one-off action films that come out. But I'm talking about when you back in the day when you'd go, okay, what's coming out over the summer? This, and this. And then you just kind
Raiders
of look at it,
was
you circle it,
huge.
you go, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
see that. I don't know what it is, but it looks kind of interesting. The trailer's kind of good, and you're like, wow, I really do believe, even though Jaws was huge and Star Wars is a big deal, and still people start doing franchises and tentpole movies, with then. I still think that Raiders to me kind of almost defines
Well,
the start of the summer blockbuster action film. I really
I think
do.
I think what really helps Raiders, because it was based off those older movies like
Yep.
Sir with Dial and The Lost and stuff. It's just like, so Journey to the Center of the Earth, and people are like, oh my gosh, Alan Quartermain is the other one.
Hmm.
And people were like, oh my gosh, they're bringing us back. And because remember, it's the 80s, we want to have fun. So people, especially when this came out, this just went crazy nuts. I imagine. Um, I was -4 at this point. I was more than 85. Um, and yeah, I said, like, this Harrison Ford has a charming personality, and we get to see him outside of Star Wars in a lead role by himself without all this, and it's just the music, the adventure, the gunfire, the chases. This is what we want from action movies, And I honestly, after I can only imagine you see these later, like these action movies. Remember the late 80s was the action movies. How many of them looked at this and like, you know what? They've got everything. They got the car chases, they got the bad guys, and they got the guns. It's like, and he's American. He's like, he wants to preserve stuff. It's like, well, let's just we'll take that to 11. I can see that's why you saw like stuff like Commando and all that stuff. Because it was just fun, and everybody wanted to have fun in the
Romancing
80s.
the Stone with Michael Douglas. We talked about those films a
Yeah,
while
yeah, yeah,
back.
yeah. So I
Hmm.
mean, so like I said, when Uncharted came out, I was like, oh, it's a no brainer, and they chose the wrong actor, and it bombed. Um, but no, but like I said, this was great. They chose the best actor, and I just feel like if they ever tried to do these movies without Indiana Jones, or at least somebody in the role, I don't think they will do as well.
It is tough, and you look, we it's been on a hiatus for a couple of years here because of the name change. But I've done a show occasionally during football season called Rob's Redskins Review, because growing up from the late '70s, early '80s when I started watching football, I was always a big Redskin fan. And they changed their name a couple of years ago, and so I've always argued, though, one of the things that's going on now is the team finally got sold by the guy that's had them for about 25 years or so to 30 years, and was one of the worst owners in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we got a new guy that's supposedly going to do things right. They come out with all the happy talk, and it's always cheap, and it doesn't matter until
Yeah.
you see stuff. But the reality of it is they want to act like, hey, all you people are old. We don't care if we just win some games or be competitive. We'll get a fan base. We can move the stadium wherever we want to. We can do this with merch. And they do everything that has nothing to do with the culture and the history of the team. And by ignoring the name Redskins and dealing with that old fan base, you're shutting out a lot of people that, like
Mm-hmm.
myself, if my son or daughter wanted to watch them, and it would become a bonding thing, that's great. And sports are digested a lot differently with younger people today, and I understand that's a challenge in and of itself. But the bottom line is you're cutting off a lot of people, and you're basically starting from scratch. But who are you, the fucking Commanders, you goddamn commies, what everybody calls you? You got to know you're a buffoon. But they're cowardly and they're weak, and they won't go back to the Redskins. How does this relate to Raiders of the Lost Ark? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask, because I was going to tell you anyway.
It's a name change.
You're absolutely right. And whether it's Raiders of the Lost Ark or Raiders or Indiana Jones or whatever, it doesn't need to be Indiana Jane, right? It doesn't need to be any, you
And
know,
Joe.
well, I know, but we've talked about this at length. We're looking forward to seeing the Ghostbusters movie, although I've got some fear about it. majority of the time, I'd say 90% of any of these reboots, soft sequels, whatever you want to call them, relaunches, they fail miserably because they think they can take the property and just go, well, if I take this property and just flip stuff around, tell it the way
And
I want to, it's going to work automatically, and that's not true. It's definitely
yeah,
not true when you force
I,
certain things to it, which we don't really get into that, but you're 100% right. This works because of Harrison Ford, and everything's magical in it. It's a great looking film. The action's fun. Everything seems like it's set up for a piece. Then you get a little bit of chance to breathe when they're talking about stuff, and it's a mystery. So the history part of it makes it seem like it's bigger than what it really is. I mean, and it just builds and builds to the end, and
it's the
it's so good.
cast. The
Yeah,
cast was so good. The writing was so good. John Rhys Davies, Canarians, like Candy, and then you got the monkey. He's like, what happened to him? He had a bad date, you know. Like this movie, everything from the actors, the personalities. You try to reboot this with unknowns. And now that might be saying people, well, you don't know. Like it's really surprised you. Look at Michael Dudikoff, American Ninja. It's like, but what made Raiders was Harrison Ford. Just
yeah.
Star Wars was Han Solo, was Harrison Ford. People didn't go. I obviously watched the Star Wars movies was for Harrison Ford. I don't care give two shits about Mark Hamill. He's great as a Joker, but that's it. On screen, I don't want to see him. I only want to hear his voice as a Joker.
Do you think
But
a lot of younger people today, or people that are more into what you have on your other channel with comic books and those things, they
it's
recognize him not from the Star Wars stuff, but because of the Joker?
oh well, I would say a lot of people today when I think of Mark Hamill, it's Joker, then Luke Skywalker.
Gotcha.
Where before, in the 70s and 80s, he was Luke Skywalker, a one-hit pony, one trick pony. After Return of the Jedi, he kind of tried to do some other stuff, and
Don't
as a
forget Corvette Summer.
Garrett Summer, he was also in the Guyver.
Yep, with somebody remembers.
But I mean, like, yeah, that was pretty much about it. It's like, so I don't know. It's he hasn't really branched out, and that's kind of how Bruce Campbell was. Bruce Campbell found his niche. Bruce Campbell became Ash Williams, and anytime he tries to do something else, people just don't really care for it. They only want to see him as Ash Williams. So, and that's kind of the same thing. I don't want to see another guy coming like, well, he's the new Ash. It doesn't work that way.
It's the same with Mike Myers. He can't do a goddamn thing else. And everyone's like, "Shut up until you give me gold member 2," you know. Or I mean,
Give me Shrek number 5, bro.
I mean, nobody cares. And
Uh,
I know everyone says I don't want to be typecast. I want to expand my range.
give
Okay.
you a bridge every franchise. Get with the times, caveman.
And
Yeah,
you know
no.
what? It's funny Eric puts that up because it reminds me of something I saw the other day when I was watching the Tampa Bay Bucks get cheered on by 70-plus-year-old Ric Flair win their playoff game. During that, there was a Geico commercial, and about 15, 20 years ago, I guess it was, they struck gold with these cavemen that would talk or whatever, like so easy a caveman could do it. And people don't give a shit about Geico, but the buzz was the cavemen. So everyone said, "Oh, there's buzz on the cavemen. Let's try to make a TV show out of it." And it's like lasted like 2 episodes. It's like, you fuckheads, you don't get it. I know you're trying to bleed everybody for as much money as you can. I understand it, but again, when you don't do things the right way, you're not. The money would come as a consequence of you doing things the right way, whether it's in sports or movies and all that. And a lot of people seem to forget that rather simple formula. And I know there's a lot of writers and people out there that sit there and say, "Well, I think this needs to be this." And boy, talk about a sense of entitlement with James Bond and everything else there too. How they've shit on all
Yep.
these things that they just can't make something new. And for the time, Indiana Jones was fairly new. I mean, we had movies that were set around that time. I'm thinking, of course, like The Mummy. You talk about war movies too, Flight of the Phoenix. All these things come up. But look, you watched Humphrey Bogart not for the film. You watched it because of him. You're watching Raiders of the Lost Ark
Uh,
not for the film, but because of him. And so there is this thing of star power, and it's an interesting thing too because I think the change in the actors and actresses working
yeah,
for the studios
all
and
the
being put in
actors.
things.
Yeah,
Well, it
it's
changed.
kind of
where
like here real quickly if I may. It's kind of like new wrestling. There's new wrestlers, and none of them really stand out because they're either not allowed to, or they're too afraid to stand out.
they're all
Unlike if
about
you
the
go
same.
or if you go back to Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, how those guys stood out and just did crazy stuff. It's a totally different genre now. So yeah, when it comes to new actors, there isn't that many. I come out and say like, well, who would I want to do? Who could do this? Who could do this? And I think I'm trying to think of who would actually be a good action star, and because I can't really think of any right now. I mean, I like Guy Pearce. I think he's more of an older actor, but I think he should be doing more action movies as the hero. I loved him in Lockout. He was great at that. He was sarcastic. He was, snarky, and he was a badass. And then, but he only likes doing the bad guys drama periods, But Tom, I don't see people like Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson being the action stars.
Yeah, and your comparison to modern day wrestling is interesting too, because being an old school wrestling fan myself, when you have territories, things are different. But like if everybody's with the WWE now, they're getting trained at the Performance Center here in Central Florida, and what do? They're getting trained. You're like, yeah, they're getting trained by the best of the best. Okay, great, but you know what?
Be jobbers.
Well, 90% are going to be jobbers, but your job, no pun intended, as a jobber is to make the other guy look good. And if you do a good job of making somebody else look good, you can make a living doing it. But everybody does this cooperative stuff. They talk too much. They don't fight, which in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's so obvious that they're doing everything they can except trying not to wrestle. But it comes down to the classic thing of, people have a certain inherent star appeal to them that you want to see. And sometimes they seem to have it from the beginning. Orson Welles certainly did that. Charlton Heston, in my opinion, Humphrey Bogart. You could definitely argue Harrison Ford that you watched a lot of his films that you would not have watched if he was not the lead guy in it. But he's just somebody that I think back then as a kid, you go, hey, it'd be fun to be like him, or that role is kind of.
Remember, we're also the movies we're watching today. We're watching Liam Neeson or what's the other guy that was the older actor going doing action stuff. It was Tom Cruise. We're still watching Tom Cruise, even though he doesn't age. He's a vampire. Keanu Reeves is a guy who's suddenly become like the huge blockbuster action guy. And honestly, I'm trying to think of who would be the younger cast coming up that would be the new action stars. There's even a rumor of they're doing a Top Gun 3 now. There's a rumor that they're bringing that in there. So it's like you said, it's hard to say what the future of action movies is going to be, or even adventure movies. I mean, a lot of the horror movies are just the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it's nothing really new. I said Evil Dead at the time broke that mold, became something different on a low budget thing, and just captivated people. Sam Raimi's vision, directing everything, the way he did things was great. And then you had Indiana Jones, who took an old thing like Young Quartermain, which really wasn't that popular, but it was known. Same with Sir Conan Doyle's Arthur, or I forget what it's like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's his Land of the Lost. And then you had other ones. Sure, there was probably back in the day, and he basically took an old, basically a 1940s or 1930s, kind of like a adventure story, modernized it a little bit, and it just made it fun, And
yeah, you definitely had a vision for it, and I think too that when you talk about these kinds of films, everybody's an action star these days. They're saying, you know what, I want to do an action film. So they go get their gun training, they get their this and that training, they have their stunt doubles come in, they run a cycle, put on 20 pounds, but they don't live that lifestyle on the outside. So it's very hard for them to come in and actually portray that, I think, effectively or with a certain element of charisma. I'm looking at you, Ryan Gosling, and many others, because you're just, one noter and have zero charisma. And that's something that you just get from your lifestyle, like a Charles Bronson or these older actors that had
Ryan Gosling, at least he did was it the Gray Man? Was it him that did that? It was on Netflix.
I have no idea.
And he's going to do the Fall Guy. He said he's somewhat, but they're not the big these aren't the big blockbuster hits. But I heard that the Gray Man was really good. It's on Netflix. But like I said, a lot of the action movies aren't really that great. There's a few here and there every once in a while, but like that late 80s, man, it was just like every year was a banger movie, or at least you got one or two in there. You had Stallone, you had Arnold, you had Jean-Claude Van Damme just starting. Jackie Chan was doing his martial arts. I'm trying to think who else. Chuck Norris, you had all these different things coming out on top of each other. It's just like, holy crap. It's like, basically, it's like that when the fireworks went off, when all fireworks in San Francisco, they were all let off at the same time that one year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the 80s was, late 80s for action movies was. It was insane.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing: if you're a horror fan, and I think horror is one of the best, genres that you can have for film. I think you can do a lot with it. Again, I don't believe in horror comedy, but you can tell a lot of stories differently, and I think there's a lot of creativity that you can do in it. And I just don't mean kills and this and that, but just in terms of atmosphere, you can be a
Hmm.
gothic type movie like we talked about recently last week on our top 10 films of 1980. When I mentioned John Carpenter's The Fog, I loved it then, loved it now. Most people say it's a little boring, it's not that good film, and I can see that, and I don't disagree with that. But there's just something watchable about it, and even somebody that's a B actor had been around forever that's in there, like Tom Atkins, it's got an anchor. It's really hard to find somebody that I think you can go to. So for me, what I've been forced to recognize over the past few years is if it's got, like, say, James Wan's name attached or Lee Wen, I'll give it a chance. May not see all of them, especially if it's the comic book stuff, but like The Invisible Man, which happened to have a woman and they did it differently, that was interesting. I think they have a bit of vision, and it's weird because they're very young. They didn't live through this time period. So I think that you've got some of the exceptions to the rule with some actors and stuff that are out there. And anytime Netflix does something good like Archive 81, they say, yeah, it's too good, so we're not going to put any money behind it.
Right.
They just want volumes of hours of digestible crap that nobody's going to remember for the most part. And it's kind of sad in a way because we want a good film. I think we both liked Last Voyage of the Demeter, and that took a shit, but I mean, it's like,
Yep.
that's a good film. Whoever did that and put that together, I want more from you. Well, I'm not saying a sequel, but man, imagine if you did another horror
Yeah.
movie and Dark Universe could still be done from Universal. And it brings me up to one of the last points I'll mention, because I think, when you originally started talking about Raiders, I think everybody's aware of it, but just for it to be said for the younger audience, Nazis are always the convenient bad guy and still are, if you really want to make it that way.
Hmm.
I think that the whole public domain thing, which really has a lot to do with Disney from the 20s and 30s on, is a big deal because you take a look at somebody like Clive Owen. He just has a new show coming out where he plays Sam Spade, one of Dashiell Hammett's
Wow.
characters, played by Everett Bogart, as an older guy retired with his wife who's dead in France, and he gets involved in a mystery. And I'm looking at that going, okay, that's different. But damn it, they got Clive in it, and it's a character, and they're trying to do something. Hopefully, it won't suck. I'll give that a
Clive
shot.
Owen was another actor. He did
Who?
Shoot 'em up. Clive Owen did the International, I think it was. Clive
Yeah,
Owen.
Croupier. He's been in a
Uh,
lot. He should have been James Bond to me instead of Daniel Craig.
yeah. Well, I, I know Daniel Craig got the role, but Daniel Craig should have been Bond, not Daniel Craig. I
Clive
mean,
Owen should have been. Well,
yeah, I mean, like, because we watched Casino Royale. Casino Royale is still a good movie, but after that, it just got to the point where like they lost the plot.
and do you
Eh,
watch a film for him? Oh, Daniel Craig's in it. Let me go watch it. Whether it's Knives Out or something else. No.
you're watching it James Bond, and that's kind of how it's always been James Bond. Whether it's
Yeah,
since Connery left. I mean, I didn't care for Roger Moore, but I watched because it was James Bond.
I love me some Roger Moore.
I know you
Roger
do.
Tainment, as
You
they
want some
call it.
more,
I
don't
love
you?
them all. Yeah, more is more. That's exactly right. I mean, it's tough because Indiana Jones. It's one of those films that you just go, yeah, if I have to put on my short list of a
It's
film that somebody has to see, no matter what year or what type or what age or where you're at, it's this film. It's close to being a perfect film as possible. I think the
it's
only flaws
yeah.
I could find in it is that a lot of his films, Spielberg has a certain feel to it. And it's not a bad thing, but I don't know. It's hard to explain that this is the first of a lot of his movies that I'm watching. I'm going, man, this is great. And he's got some films that I'm like, I just don't want to see it. I don't care that your name's Steven
It's
Spielberg.
yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. He does it great. The film looks fantastic. The colors and everything, the set pieces and all that. It's just tremendous. It's a no brainer. You start with this, throw in one or two other things in there, and that's all you really need to see.
Honestly, for me, you just start that music by John Williams, and that just gets you pumped. Now, I want to point out though, we would have had if we had not goofed up and did Superman 2 last week because there was a technical error. It says 81, but when you look at it, it says 82 US release. So it would have
Yeah,
been we would have had Indy versus Evil Dead, but since we already did that one, we decided we'll give Evil Dead its time on the spotlight because Evil Dead. I think a lot of people sleep on the first one. They may remember like, oh, there's this show, cool, but they never went and actually watched the movies.
yeah.
Evil Dead 2 I've heard from a lot of people they like Evil Dead 2 because it's more in line with the others. where Evil Dead 1's kind of like the, all right, we're kind of just gonna skip this and just gonna go, because
Well, I'm
Evil
so
Dead
glad
2,
they made it better. Yeah.
yeah, Evil Dead 2
Bullshit.
Evil Dead 2 was a soft reboot.
Yeah.
And which is okay, but I like both films. In this film, it's basically he has to dismember. He can't dismember Linda because Linda is like, I love the fact that he's so distraught, and it's believable. This is a guy. It's like, what the hell did I do? Like, he was gonna propose to her and everything. Got her like this sweet bottle cap necklace. And he was gonna propose to her, and like, in his habit. So then, like I said, he has like, she's gonna jump on him, and he basically hits her over the head, or knocks her, decapitates her head with the shovel. And then we get to see the claymation stuff, which is stop animation, was really cool.
You only hurt the ones you love.
And honestly, you tell this movie was written as a one-off, because as his friend comes back in the woods, Scott attacks him, and they got the axe, and he's like, he becomes a Deadeye, and then he like, starts sucking the girl's hair or something like that, or something weird like that. It was really gross. And so as Cheryl, Scott, and Linda, or not Linda, I think what the other was, they're all attacking him, and as they're attacking, he's trying to basically save himself. The Book of the Dead gets tossed in the fire, and then they all start decomposing and discover. And I love the fact that the movie, and this was really cool about with Sam Raimi's directing. He goes out, it gets out of the cabin. It's in there, and all of a sudden we see this camera angle, ooh, and it's actually Sam Raimi making the noise of the ghost, like the noise, and the camera's going at him, and then it turns around and he gets possessed. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. There's some people will say that when you take Indiana Jones and, it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that, it's very whatever. You know what? They hit a friggin' home run with it, because there's a lot of films that people might say are derivative and, I've seen stuff like this before. Put your spin on it. Okay, that's fine. And, we talked about buddy cop films being a theme. We try to have a tendency to talk in themes here a little bit, whether it's individual actors or time periods and what's going on. And to your point, Indiana just blew up. And I still say, gosh, after Indiana Jones, people just wanted more and more and more. And when Temple of Doom came out, people were very disappointed and divisive, but they're like, well, at least we got some indie. So when the third one came out, people were like, holy crap, you got Connery. Jesus Christ, you hit a friggin' home run. And that's why you've always said those three are the only ones that really exist. It's true. I don't even like to count the second one, but it's just, the first one was so good that I think when the next one came out, I think it was in '84, that you had 3 years of people waiting, and you had all this pent up whatever. That alone can allow a franchise to take off. Not, hey, we got to get that next one out within a year, because if not, we're going to lose that key demographic audience for those young people. Or
people
like how they toss it out. No, less is more. Sometimes.
I was thinking, once we finally get done with these, get to 1989, we finish that. The following week, we should start taking back the ones that what people think were the best. If you guys are voting, like I said, go in the comment section. Let us know what you think is the better one, and what we'll do is we'll start. We could do a bracket, baby. We could have them. We could have Indy's clearly winning for this one. You guys go back and watch the first one. What do you think is better, Indiana or Superman 2 or Empire Strikes Back? Let us know, and we'll do some head-to-head. We'll compare movies again. We'll just keep going until we find a definitive.
It's by no means the 10 best movies. It's just 10 very significant ones that we like.
No.
But I mean, seen all of them. Last week when we did 1980, obviously we didn't cover Raging Bull, which everybody's going to sit there and say how great of a movie Raging Bull is. That's true, and I might even go, wow, it was one of the best films of the year. But I doubt I'm probably going to rewatch it again. So there's a certain sense of this when you, I think everybody just sits there and go Raiders.
Right. Well, yeah. But I mean, when we get to the late 80s, there's a lot of action movies coming out, and Raiders, as great as I like it, there's other movies that I like better. So I mean, 84 is Ghostbusters. Raiders versus Ghostbusters for me. I if we did that, it'd be like, I'm obviously going with Ghostbusters. I think I love both, but Ghostbusters, I lean more toward it. I just think it's more well made. But that's my opinion. But I mean, I wouldn't love to start putting some of these ones, that we're choosing here up against the other ones.
And see how just to reiterate to some of the people that maybe listen for the first time or hadn't caught the last one yet, we're going back and revisiting some of the older content that we did 4 or 5 years ago here on the Xtreme Movie Show. So we're going through each of the decades in each of the years, and I'm picking out 10 films to talk about. Obviously, we have the young 20-something Professor Pixel has not seen a lot of them, so part of that's so he can go out there and watch it. We get that third generational viewpoint as well as everybody in the audience. So Sunday, we're going to be doing the 10 films. All three of us are going to have a list. We're going to compile it, put 10 films up there. That's going to be Sunday night, so you guys be ready with your 10 on that. And then next Tuesday, we're going to go into 1982. And pretty soon, won't be long, we're going to be talking a lot of Ninja, which is great. So I'm looking forward to that. Any final thoughts? Anything you need to plug, RDB, before we call it a night?
82 Electric Boogaloo. That's the year. We're wrapping up right here. If you want to follow me, I'll be over with Zach, and we're on my channel, Geeky Puppet Show, talking about the new comic books come out this year. So, or not this year, but this week. Sorry, I'm stuck in the year mode. But if you guys can, leave a comment down below. Let us know what is your favorite movie out of these two, and do that. Go back on 1980 as well. Let us know, because that way we get an idea as far as what are the more popular movies, and maybe we'll put them up against each other when we're done with all these. So with that being said, I hope you guys have already clicked, liked, and maybe subscribed. Because we like the subscriptions, but we also like the fact that you guys are engaging in an algorithm. 7 people watching. That's really cool. We had 8. We're just trying to get more views on this. So if you guys can go back, watch some of the older stuff, and just, even if they have the mute off, mute, I don't care. It still counts as a view. We're just trying to build up the watch hour time, because now we have the subs. We just need the time. So if you guys got the time, we'll have the time, and then we'll have a good time.
We don't do auctions, but if we did, it would be extreme.
Extreme. Hello to Maranya.
Yeah, AT versus Rocky 3. Yeah, that's man, it's just, God, it's so fun talking about the 80s and the movies that came out. I'm not saying they're always the best, but they're just friggin' fun. Evil Dead, I love you. We honestly thought you'd put up a good fight, but it was a no contest. You're a jobber going out.
It was hard.
But well, God, to anybody really. I think Sid Vicious would be one of the most terrifying guys. Come out, choke slam you, powerbomb, done. That's what happened tonight with Indiana Jones.
It's you're going up against John Cena. You're not going to win against John Cena.
On that note, unfortunately, took the wind out of my sails. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for watching, listening. As always, stay extreme. Good night now.
Good night, guys.